Terrible. All right, we are live. Let's do this. Okay, we're going to kick this off. Hello, welcome back for almost all of you guys. I believe there's a handful, a very, very small handful of people in this subject who haven't done Contract A, LA1105. And that would be my echoey voice in the background because I didn't turn off the sound in this bit down here. Let's turn that sound off because that's not going to work at all. For those who haven't met before, I'm Simon. I've taken over from the lovely Rachel Bradshaw, who is now currently milking cows and smelling the roses on the tablelands before she moves back to moves up to Cairns for the start of next year. The way I'm organising this subject, for those that, well, most of you probably haven't had me as a lecturer before, I live stream these to YouTube, and so that you can either, if you can't quite make it to 4 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon, you're welcome to obviously watch the live stream. You can also go into the chat, try to avoid saying things that are horrible and offensive. But you can just go through and watch that. YouTube, I believe, about 20 minutes after each thing finishes, goes and does some processing, and then it'll appear up forever and a day. So that's a helpful way just to do that. It's a little bit faster than going and getting things through MediaSite. Everything's also recorded through MediaSite as well. MediaSite is the internal JCU system for recording that happens whenever this little red light here is on. So if you're in a room and you're saying something horrible about some of the staff members and this little red light's on, just keep that one in the back of your mind. Okay, a couple of other things. For this subject also, I'm going to try and do it topic by topic base. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the subject, about me, about timetabling, and about sort of what we expect of you guys. Things that relate to the subject as a whole. We're going to go through that over the first few minutes. Now, because I didn't get a chance to see you guys for Contract Part 1, I'll also just go over where this sits and this particular course sits and the various topics within it sit in relation to contract law broadly. And we'll do that for a few minutes, then take a short break. The remainder of this lecture is going to be about the vitiating factor of contractual mistake. You guys, again, the slides of this would have been on JCU. They were put up a few days ago. Sorry about the dorky pictures of cats. I'm trying to wean them out of all of my slides. All right, no cats. No more cats. We're trying to get rid of that. I've had some unsavory feedback from time to time, but all right. Also note that just by the way this is structured, I stream this through OBS, which is the streaming software, so there's a little bit of a delay between everything I say and what appears on there. So click something there and there's about a 10-second delay. So apologies, I try to time this so we're talking to whatever the next slide coming up is, but yeah, you might have to keep yourself on your toes, particularly if you've got the lecture slides in front of you and it doesn't line up with what I'm saying. Okay. So yeah, I'm Simon. I've got a room tucked away in the top floor of Building 27 until the dreaded accountants come along at some stage later in the semester and kick me out. I'm the only law staff member up there, apart from Stephen Graw. But you can find me. Just make note, because I'm teaching 3 subjects this semester, they've very kindly allocated me 3 office hours. Feel free to turn up at any of those. I don't know if you guys are aware the way office hours work. Basically, the staff under JCU teaching policy are obliged to set aside some time for you guys to just come and see us. We must be there during that time. So if I'm not there, you can get the Ben Atkinson cattle prod or the Jamie Fellows cattle prod and make them turn up. But I'm also available a variety of other times as well. The subject coordinator for this subject is actually Dr. Ben Atkinson. But by and large, unless they're things particularly about me or about Peter Below, who's the lecturer in Cairns, you can direct or at least CC most of the things that sort of questions you have about the subject for me as well. Rachel usually takes care of those things, but she's, like I said, she's on leave this semester. The link to YouTube, I said I find it easy. I just type my name, to misspell my name, type it into Google and it'll pop up. There's a bit.ly link there. You can grab it from the slides if you want to retrieve that. The subject outline is the thing that you guys use to twist our arms. This semester I have the joy of teaching administrative law again. That's a subject all about arm twisting. And I say tongue-in-cheek or certainly did last year to them, that going through instruments like the subject outline, finding rules that we have to follow, and then making us follow them is actually the hallmarks of an excellent law graduate. Making people accountable, making people follow rules and do the things that they're supposed to do. Now, subject outline also has much more detail about the various pieces of assessment you guys are going to be doing this semester for the subject, as well as a bunch of support services. The one that I've put up there is for Law Online, which is relatively recent. And when I say relatively recent, there have been, I think, 0 emails to it at this stage. You may be aware that there was a business online, and there still is a business online at JCU, and there's a business online team. I'm actually in that team. So the days when I'm not teaching, I'm on level 3, cutting code for the college or doing whatever they tell me to do. So don't be surprised if somebody called Simon actually responds to your complaint. It is actually me fixing your tech problem. Okay. Anybody got any questions so far? Look, I have no problems with people interacting. When I say no problems, it's a really good way of doing these things. Get the full value from your education, ask questions, and it is one of those things, again, I say a little tongue-in-cheek, that as a mature age student doing law, I started doing law full-time in 2009. Being a mature age student, we have no qualms whatsoever putting our hands up. And in fact, the fabled line, Rachel, I don't understand, please stop and explain that, used to come up all the time in our classes. Please feel free to do that. Not just the mature age students in the room, anybody, can turn this into something that's more of a conversation. It's not just a case of me essentially regurgitating all of the legal rules and principles to do with contract law to you guys. There's a time and place for going through and doing that and asking questions. And odds are good, if you think something's really unclear or ambiguous, there's probably at least a handful of others in the room thinking the exact same thing. So please feel free to stop me at any stage. I think I've got there my timetable. That's my teaching timetable starting next week. Again, the consultation times are slotted in there somewhere. Just note that I'm going to be unavailable for consults outside those things during the shaded in bits, which starts next week as well. All right. Okay, just one other small point as well, kind of annoyingly in terms of timing. Jamie Fellows, Van Lee, myself, and Neil Dunbar are all away next week on Friday, from the Thursday and the Friday next week. So if you do have classes with any of the 4 of us, I believe the others have all done some sort of make-up type situation. There's one of the contract law shoots, it was on the Friday. It's been moved to the Monday afterwards, Monday the 12th. I believe it's at 10 o'clock. It's actually reflected in the timetable itself. They've got a room. I'm not sure what it is. I believe it's in Building 27. I moved up to level 3 earlier this year after spending a lot of time on level 1 in the law school. Law school's on level 1. The other business disciplines are in levels 2 and 3, but the education design team is on level 3. So I've spent a lot of time with the education designers this year. And one thing that's really important about contemporary learning, and this certainly flows into JCU's policy, is design. Subjects are supposed to be designed to really maximize learning for you guys. One of the sort of the hallmarks of that is that when we're trying to work out what the design of a particular subject is, it's the 130-hour rule. 130-hour rule is that for every subject that's worth 3 credit points, so that's all of your undergraduate subjects, the idea is you put in 130 hours of work in relation to that subject, And I can't say I guarantee you that you have a very, 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 very good chance of doing well in terms of grades for that subject. That's the expectation. I'm not saying that's the norm. Most people don't spend 130 hours, to be perfectly frank. But in terms of allocating your own time, I think it's important to remember that that is what we design these subjects around. And so that's inclusive of everything. It's inclusive of your exam study time. It's inclusive of your lecture time, all the time you guys spend on assessment. Not sure if that counts towards the JCU LSS pub crawl next Friday, which again, very sadly, sorry, Jamie, me, Van, and Neil sadly can't attend. But I'll return to that a little bit later about the necessity and really the importance of networking as part of your legal education. Okay, all right, next one. Click, 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 click. Right, some key dates. You guys are aware there's a thing called census date. Census date is the point in time where if you're enrolled in a subject, and it's a contract law rule, once you're enrolled in a subject, you've agreed to be bound by the terms of that particular arrangement. The key thing to note is that your HECS, for most of you that are doing HECS things, that is the point in time where that becomes liable. So the university gets paid if you're enrolled on census date. However, there is another date, a little bit later on, I believe it's a week or so, maybe a few weeks later. Oh, no, it's might be 3 weeks later, in fact, where you can withdraw from subjects. The university's pretty happy once they've got your money, but you don't think you're going to be able to complete that subject. We have a stat rule that people can unenroll, and it won't affect your grade point average. And look, I think perhaps as lecturing staff, we're a little bit tongue-in-cheek about the importance of grade point average. It matters, particularly for those that are going to go out into the open market, and you're going to be competing against people both from this part of the world, but also elsewhere in Australia. Your final grades do matter, and they matter to us too. We, hand on heart, would be absolutely ecstatic if we could go and give everyone 7s, which is an HD, for every single subject. That would make us incredibly happy. But we have to be able to demonstrate that back to the auditors. They're the ones that, essentially, we want to work with you guys to try and defeat them. And what we find, sadly, or kind of naturally, I suppose, is that particularly over large subjects, life gets in the way. Life gets in the way of all of us, and grades generally do, as a result, kind of bell curve. So that just be mindful that your grades do matter. They are important. Don't think that they don't matter. And just do the best you can in the circumstances that you're in. Some of us have been dealt easier hands in life, and we do appreciate and respect that. And again, from the staff's perspective, if you guys are struggling, contact us. Tell us in advance. One of the key things to note here is that you guys, for most of you, doing the first substantive law, and look, to be perfectly frank, this is a real subject. Contract A, where you learn about offer and intention and consideration, capacity, and those things. 99% of the time, that stuff's not really an issue. The stuff you learn in this subject, for most of you, is going to be your first substantive law subject. The things you will learn in the subject actually do matter, and they will have an impact on your personal and professional lives. And so I think last semester was easier. Contract this semester is much more structured. It's I say for this, each little atomic thing that you do for this subject, you can learn, and you can put the time in it, and you can master it. But if you don't turn up to something, and you miss a lecture, and you don't learn about unconscionable conduct, or you don't learn about breach through frustration, for example, it's a concept that you'll never know, or at least not you'll be able to pick up, or you have to work your way back into doing it. So each little unit for this one's a bit more atomic. Okay, assessment. the first piece of assessment, again, I'm working with Peter on this. I'm aiming actually for that to be released at 5 p.m. on this Friday. And it has a pretty short turnaround. It's only got 3 weeks. We'll be going through and doing things on vitiating factors. That's the material from the first 4 weeks of the semester, although the assessment piece, again, I have to check it with Peter, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't actually include the 4th week, because that would be a bit mean. It's got there that it's 30%. Not sure that's right, actually. I thought it was the other way around for the two, but again, whatever's written in the subject outline is going to be the weighting that's given to that. And that's copied from the subject outline, so just, if anybody's got the subject outline where it's got the longer piece, it is 30, it's 30 and 20 as well? Okay. That's quite a lot, eh? 30% for a relatively short piece. And I'll go over that, but I'll be going over it next week. In terms of what is required from you guys. I have put in the subject outline the structural requirements. You have to follow the Australian Guide to Legal Citation version 4. And I do say to people that the AGLC is a series of rules, just a bunch of rules, carefully and tidily wrapped up into a 416-page reference guide. Those are the rules, and I'm not trying to sound flippant about this. It takes a lot of people a lot of time to go through and learn those things. It's actually my research area, is in legal writing itself. I personally think it's a total and utter waste of time, but these are the rules that are given to us, and I do say this, quite honestly, if you're not good at following rules, a career in the law might not be the right thing or right path to go down. And so most of you guys have done LA1102, Legal Research and Writing, although I was just warned today that there is some, has anybody here not done 102? LA1102, you've got a handful, 1, 2, 3, 4. I do suggest you guys come and book some time with me very early in the semester. And for those that haven't done LA1105, a couple of people who've done that definitely need to send me an email really, really quickly to be able to go over that material. Okay, so the subject outline will have essentially all of the submission requirements as well. Hard copy, soft copy, safe assign, and the dates. Okay, the exam for this, and I believe later on there's a statutory contracts. That'll be involving the Australian Consumer Law and the Sale of Goods Act. And we'll go through those, I think from about week 5 onwards. Exam for the subject 50%, going to be very, very similar to the LA1105 exam. It'll be open book. And as we're aware, open book exams have got their own quirks, their own strategies that you need to really master in order to do those well, and the IRAC method is something that I will definitely spend time with you guys when going through the tutorials, particularly for those like me that has very slow handwriting. There's probably people in this room in the same boat as me. Slow handwriting is awful when you're doing an open book exam, and so I've had to develop strategies myself around doing that, and I'm sympathetic for those in the same boat. Okay, any questions on that? Okay. That one. Textbooks. Wow, they're expensive. I was the treasurer for the Law Student Society for years. And the amount of times people would have shrink-wrapped, the books, it's Radon and Gooley, I believe, we're using for this subject. Yeah, same book. And they're two together, the case book, and they're together, and the amount of copies of that ended up in the hands of the Law Student Society to be sold that was still shrink-wrapped was quite remarkable, because they are an expensive pair of books. They're very in-depth, I get it, but most of you guys actually got a copy of that book. I believe it's the one for the previous semester. Yeah, Rachel and I have talked at length about that particular book. It's in depth. And what that means is that when doing things in depth, you can achieve a level of understanding which is very detailed. However, in our experience, that's not the first thing that's on everyone's minds. Usually, the first thing you want to do is to organize in your head a good structure, to actually know and understand the base principles of what it is that you're doing, in order to then delve into the more complex components of law. And this is true of all of substantive law subjects. And so I probably got on there, I'll have Steve's book as well. Professor Stephen Grawl was the head of law here for a very long time. Yeah.
The girls in the co-op are having some difficulty finding that.
Are they?
Because it's the wrong reference edition.
Oh, the 8th edition. Have I got, is it the 9th?
Yeah, there is 9th, but it's dated 2007.
Is that what it was?
And it's now Robinson, not Nexus.
Oh, okay.
They're having some real problems in the co-op
Trying to align those things together. To be frank, Steve usually gets me to do the changes on that book. He gives a new version every few years. There aren't a lot of changes in that book over the last sort of 7 or 8 years, provided you've got one from about 2012, 2013 onwards. The structure for that you'll be able to pick up from that is really what you're after in terms of that. The key thing to note, something really important happened in terms of contract law in Australia, happened in 2010. Anybody know what that was? Rachel probably didn't talk about it, wouldn't have needed to. It's when the Australian Consumer Law was all the Competition and Consumer and Competition Act in 2010. It came into force on the 1st of January 2011. And so that aspect of dealing with statutory contracts did actually change that component for the subject. But the stuff that we're doing for most of the first 4 weeks hasn't changed for a long time. And by a long time, decades. So you find that, particularly with Steve's book, which getting a copy of it or being able to borrow a copy of it, even if it's slightly older, I think is a worthwhile thing to do, because in my opinion, it explains some of the principles of contracts a little easier. Also, Steve was the head of law here, and so a lot of the materials, the teaching materials, are very much structured around the way his book's structured as well. So it can be helpful, even if you get a chance to just go through and read it. There's multiple copies in the library. But yeah, if you can, the version after 2012 or 2013 is the way to go. Okay, a couple of other things. I do community legal these days with the Townsville Community Legal Service. And years ago, I used to be there with graduate students, or those that are close to finishing their degree, and they would ask me a question, usually in some inane area of tort or something similar, and I'd just say, oh, just go into Helsby, just go into the laws of Australia and have a look. And I'll never forget this, happened to me 3 times. And they looked back at me and went, what? And just go, yeah, just go into Helsby, just go into Westlaw and get it. And they didn't know what I was talking about. So I stepped them through it, going into the Laws of Australia, which is a database JSU subscribes to. It's under the Westlaw subscription. And you go down there on the left-hand side and you'll go through it. And I just remember the looks on some of their faces. One of them almost cried. Why was I never told this at university? And it's a little bit of a gotcha. You would have been shown this by Alice, but probably in your first week. And we've got other things on our mind in the first week. So it's one thing that I'm really conscious of for you guys, going back over stuff that, in theory, you've already been over before, but to really emphasize the things that are important and to refresh your memory for a bunch of these things. It's particularly helpful for those that are doing torts. I'm just going to make that little caveat there, or more obscure areas of law. Bit trickier in contract because it's a little more big picture, but it's definitely worth going through and having a read, because it's just like anything that we have, the same thing, the same concept, the same rule, explained by different people is wonderful. And I wholeheartedly endorse going through and grabbing and listening to lecture recordings. I believe Steve Graw's from last year. I think Steve taught to a contract B rather than Rachel. And if I have access to the 2011 recordings, I'll see if I can go and find those, to be able to give you guys the option of listening to those recordings as well. I personally find it's an excellent way of learning. Same thing, but explained by different people in a slightly different way can really help. I used to say tongue-in-cheek that I think I learned more from the boozy lawyers on the lawn we had outside George Kneep in like week 10 of my first semester of doing law. I think I learned more from the third year students in that than I did from everything in Torts A. I'm pretty sure. Okay, so that's that. Do go through and have a little look. Again, it may be very, very helpful, particularly for those, again, mature A students doing, and the LLB grad students that are doing Torts P at the moment. All right, other databases, OSLE you guys should be aware of. That's the common plain text repository for most judgments from most courts in Australia. And the Law LibGuides is a collection of links to databases and other resources that Alice and Co have put up. Okay, so this is my final bit of blurb right from the outset. That 130 hours rule is how we design subjects. That is the target amount of time that I said we endorse that you put into these subjects as part of the undergraduate degree. My screen's just died. Why's my screen just died? Oh, that's a bit scary. That's just about to disappear, I think. Oh, no. Okay, fine. That's about it. And look, that's genuine and serious work. We all know how easy it is to get distracted in this day and age. Have our phones nearby, have our laptops with all sorts of things popping up. And so that's really in terms of the structured amount of work to put in, including things like listening, taking notes, attending lectures, and so on. That should be the target. Turn up. I know it sounds crazy. I was a terrible student for my first 2 degrees. And then I found when I actually decided, so first 1 and a bit degrees, when I decided I would go and do philosophy, I thought, hey, this is really good, I want to do this. So I turned up. And do you know how much easier things are? If you actually go to all the lectures, how much easier it is to understand things? It's crazy, but I didn't get that till I was about 22 years old. So do turn up tutes. It's actually mandatory tutes for the subject too. If you do not attend 8, someone can quote me, you might be able to correct me on that. Again, use the subject outline to twist my arm on that particular point. This is a first year subject in the College of Business Law and Governance, and so you must attend. It's either 7 or 8 shoots. If you don't, you have to do a please explain to the Dean, the Associate Dean of Teaching and Learning, which is the lovely Ms. Carrie Rousseau. And she's lovely 99% of the time, but that 1% is reserved for those please explain meetings. Yeah, you have to justify. And look, there's an onus reversal too. I don't know, did Rachel talk about onus reversals? Probably not, probably need it for Torts A, but there are a few there are a few in Torts, and there are a few in Contract B, where we change the burden of proof, so that it means that you have to prove or demonstrate some reason why you didn't turn up. Okay, is it 9? 9, oh wow. I thought it was 70%. Okay. All right, 75%. Wow, okay, all right. Hopefully for most of you, knowing that piece of information wouldn't have changed your behavior, because you want to come to as many of these things as possible. Reasonable excuse is always going to be fine. Send me an email if you're going to have difficulties, guys. Active with your learning. Again, it's that difference between when we're listening to stuff, which is kind of passive as an activity. Lectures aren't really one of the better strategies for getting information. It's that process of taking that information, synthesizing it into your own words. And that's why I do recommend, even if you get access to people's notes from previous semesters and such like, take things, turn them into your own words. And that is a really, really powerful way of learning this stuff. Same with things like concept maps. It's very easy to go through, get a book, or get a previous person's notes where they've done lovely little concept maps. The learning is through the creating of those objects. That's really the key learning component that goes on there. I'm sure you've all heard of Ms. Jordan Lavery. Yeah. I'm actually teaching. I'm teaching trust law this semester, and that subject used to have a really, really easy assignment until that event happened. Now it has a semester test, a really hard one. And I've said for a long time, we've sort of been paying for her sins. However, we actively encourage people to collaborate in your learning. We are social people, social creatures. Law is a social discipline, and the network that you have with your colleagues here and your peers and people in the profession, it matters. I do suggest that you do spend time, form study groups, check up on each other. There's an aspect of accountability that it seems like a really small point, but having to turn up to your study group and demonstrate what you've done, even to your peers, can be huge. It can be very powerful and very motivating. So get to know people in your class. I do recommend that. Finally, a little tongue-in-cheek there. Try. This may seem like the worst thing that's ever happened to you, having to rock up to 13 weeks of relatively dry contract law stuff. That's a fair point. Maybe it's not the most exciting thing that's ever happened to you, but I can assure you that administrative law is no walk in the park either. But it's really down to you guys. We only get to go through life one way. And me personally, going through and doing the subject, I last taught the subject in 2011. I did it as a student in 2009. And I found it to be hilariously good fun because me and my peer group got into it. We decided to engage with the material, and particularly for those that are out there in business, and either in business for yourselves or you're working in places where you're actually dealing with contracts in your day-to-day life, it's useful. This is actually the laws of the state of Queensland and the Commonwealth of Australia. And you're going to find, as you learn more of this, you're going to become more powerful as people. Now, how you use that power, well, that's really up to you guys, subject to the, guides in terms of academic conduct and I guess the solicitor's rules later on. But you guys are going to know things that your peers are not. This is the point in time where the substantive knowledge of the law itself is going to change you as human beings. So, again, how you guys do that and how the sort of person that you want to be when armed with this information, I'm going to leave that one as something of an open-ended question, but I certainly think you should reflect upon it as we go through this subject. Okay, I'm just going to end that slide. I'm going to start a new stream. We're going to talk about vitiating factors. So this is the bit where you can talk. It's okay, you can talk. It'll be about 2 or 3 minutes.